Hi, this is Bruce and welcome to my tutorial on the Carenado B350i King Air. Just a brief note, this is a personal video, one that I use later on. If I haven't flown this aircraft in months, I can come back and watch this video in under half an hour, be up to speed and ready to fly again if I've forgotten a lot of things. There are also some items in here that aren't intuitive, and either you have to wade through the PDFs and sometimes find what you're looking for, or have to watch videos like this to get caught up. So I'm doing this for myself, but I hope that others will benefit from it, so I'm sharing it with all of you, and comments are always welcome. We're always learning from each other, aren't we? I'm using P3D version 4.2, Chase Plane, Active Sky, Ultimate Traffic Live, 100% general and commercial aviation. P3D Traffic also at 100% in both cases. Windows 10, i5 overclocked, SSD drive, NVIDIA GTX 1070. We're going to begin now with the Shift 6. You can see the options that are available. Passenger door here is in the rear, and then the baggage left will be here on the end of the cowling, and then on the other side you'll see its duplicate baggage right. Everything works just great. Looks good. We'll just do a little quick roll around here and then we'll press ahead. So now we're going to close the baggage on the right. I find slowly clicking through these in an even pattern really helps. Otherwise you can go too fast and it doesn't keep up with you. The reason I haven't clicked the static elements yet is just a quick note. The Carenado aircraft seem to have a common starting feature in mind, and that is that first, everything interiorly has to be off, and the second thing that has to be is the emergency brake must be set. So if you click the static elements without both of those conditions met, yes, it turns yellow here saying that they're on, but nothing changed, so you may wonder what's wrong. Now let's take the static elements off. Let's put on, by control period, our parking brake. Now we check the static elements and presto, they're all there. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the static elements. I'm going to take off our parking brake because we want to jump in now. Shift 6 gets rid of our pop-up. We're going to jump into the pilot and command position, and here you see a cold and dark state. That's not usually how it starts. It starts off in a ready to taxi state or something thereabouts. I clicked on the cold and dark cockpit to get the look that we have now to start from scratch. You can, though, click that, but be aware you're not ready to fly. There are other things you need to pay attention to, and the rest of the information is gratis. So again, that's Shift 8. This aircraft carries 8 passengers, 1 or 2 crew, ceiling 35,000, cruise speed about 300, range 1,600 nautical miles. Normally it's less than 1,000. Takeoff runway 3,300 feet, landing runway 2,700 feet. We're going to begin where we almost always do, and that's going to set our parking brake, which is down here. Left click pulls out, means the parking brake is now set. The idle power levers, or the power levers, are at idle at the moment. These are your propeller prop levers, and they're not able to be put into feather even on a key command sequence that I put in the options. So I'm just going to run them up here to the max anyway. I'm not sure if anybody knows how to put it into feather. Let me know. The condition levers are on cutoff, and they could be put up to low idle. I know some people do, but I like to run through the N1 settings and run them up accordingly according to the flow chart. So we'll get to those in just a minute. The battery is here, right underneath this little flap. If you hit that flap, by the way, with the left click, it pops down and kicks off your generators and your bat switch, so don't mess with that, or if it does, you'll know what happened. The panel lights can now be turned on. They're all over here on the overhead. Lots of different choices. I just turned the master panel on, and while we're up here, you'll notice there's a cabin light for brightness. You can make some coffee, and then the fasten seatbelt, FSB, or no smoking fasten seatbelt. Now's the time to go ahead and left click that and get that up. Then we're going to turn the avionics switch on. The avionics is here in that little red base just above the battery that we turned on a second ago. That fired up our PFD and our MFD, multifunction flight display, primary flight display. Turn off our alerts there. Then we're going to check and make sure our transponder is on standby, and that's down here. And as you can see here in this little window, it says STBY standby. You can change the numbers, by the way, since we're looking at it. The larger knob selects the number to be changed in the squawk code, and the little one will change the one selected in the white. If you want to change standby to on or alt, you need to not left click the soft key, but you need to right click, that's not intuitive, right click that key. You can still change the numbers here the same way, but here's your soft key Alt on, off, and now it's on standby, now it's on, and we'll leave it on standby, hit return, back where you're started. Same thing for the automatic direction finder frequencies, but here you cannot change the numbers. You can only select the number you want to change. How then can you make this work? Well, you right click. Now you've got that window going on. Here's the numbers that you can choose, like first, second, or third number, or after the decimal. Let's just change the first one to 3, and then we can soft key that, and it jumps into the active part. This is your working box. This is your active part. So that's then returned, and now we got 382 instead of 282, and we were successful. So that might frustrate you first. Just right click on the soft key. You can change these numbers as you like, and problem solved. Same thing for COM1, NAV1, although you don't need to right click these. This is the working box. Click the soft key, left click, change those numbers left of the decimal with the bigger, and the smaller is to the right of the decimal. Same thing for NAV. You can change those numbers like so. If you click the soft key again, it jumps over here to the active portion, the green, and down here where we were working, we can flip that over. I do know that our first VOR is 111.8, so in our NAV1, that's the greatest place to leave it in my case. To set the trims, the wheel is here. It'll start off 0.0 on your little cheat tab thing that'll show up. Mine's showing 1.5 at the moment because I rolled my mouse wheel up 2 clicks before I started this, so it is set at 1.5 nose up. I think even 00 is fine, but you can choose as you like. The battery bus needs to be turned up to norm. It's this frightening looking stripe, do not touch me kind of thing. Left click it anyway, up to norm, and then we'll turn our beacon on, which is over here. You can see the strobe tail light, and then the other exterior lights are right here. Ice protection, since we're in this area, you might as well note that they're in that spot. Engine anti-ice is here. Auto feathers there. Engine auto ignition. Ignition switches. Gen ties. That's all in this area here. So let's press ahead. Engine auto ignition will now be armed. Left click here, and then the next step we're going to do is we're going to click on the right ignition and engine start. If you were to draw a line right down through the MF multifunction flight display right here, everything to the right would be the right engine, and everything to the left in a mirror image is the left engine. The green area will be associated with your power lever, and the white arrow that'll swing around as it heats up is your ITT. The N1 is in this section here, right and left, and the prop RPMs, right and left, are here, and the prop lever will have a great deal to do with where those are set. So when we click on the ignition and engine start with the left click, the N1 on the right is going to quickly run up to 11 and slow down, and then when it gets to 12, you'll be moving up your cutoff controls right here, your control levers, up to low idle. I think for me, when it hits 11, it's really close enough. So just for purposes, let's go ahead and get it started. And by the way, 12, low idle. Then when it gets to 50, we'll turn off the ignition and start. So let's see what happens. Here it comes, running past 5. Gets to 10 pretty quick and then starts to slow down. When it gets in the 11s, then I go ahead and run the thing up to low idle. And when it gets to 50, right there, right click on the engine ignition start, and we'll let things settle in now. Takes a second for everything to settle down. I can turn on the right gen now, which is just 2 switches to the right of where the battery switch was. Then I'm going to left click the engine on the left. Here we go. It's going to run up to about 11-ish. Then when it gets into that 11 to 12 range, right in there, I'm going to run up the other ones to idle. And then when it hits 50, I'll right click it, turn off that. Then I can turn on the left gen, which is the middle one. Notice our annunciators are improving all the time. We can also now turn off the engine auto ignition. Up above on the overhead, we can check and see how we're doing for our power, electrical power. It's on external at the start, but if we roll the mouse wheel or right click it 2 steps to the right, you'll get left gen or right gen, your call. I usually leave it on the left gen, and yes, we're getting good volts and the battery is being charged. And that's what we want to see. So let's go ahead and kick it back down here. At this point, we're going to have a look at the FMS. You might be using the Flight 1 systems. I'm not in this case. I could, but I chose not to. And just to run through what it looks like, here's your run through these. The messages look like this. The direct to switch works like this. I find that all you got to do is click the soft key and it'll immediately switch to that next waypoint or VOR, just like this. It's so simple. It's probably one of the simplest ones I've seen. The index, here's your status. That's usually what you see when you first turn on your FMS position in it. Then you can just follow these things through. You can put your airport in there, and then the GPS coordinates will appear. But here's what it would start with, position in it. Just look through these. The arrival data, I just leave that alone. It'll look blank. I've got other things already in here. Just ignore all that jazz. And then this is the tuning. Like it's the COM one is 126.325. Well, we could change that. Let's get rid of these figures, 11.8. We're going to click delete now. And then we're going to type in, let's just put 120.8 and stick it up here in the COM. That changes the COM to 120.8. And then down here at the nav, for instance, I know it's 111.8 to our first VOR. We would set that the same way. These presets are actually referring to a working window that is located just right up here in the middle of the console, this business here. These are what it's saying are your presets. So when you look here, these are the actives, these are the presets, and when you go back down to your FMS, down here, it's simply noting what's preset above, and you can't fiddle with those here. You can change them up there where I just showed you. And same thing for COM2. There's your NAV2, and then the ATC you're going to set with that little box up on the main console, which I just showed you a minute ago. And the automatic direction finder, yes, this is an easier one to even change from here. If you need to change the numbers, just enter the new ones, press the soft key next to it, and presto. This obviously reflects the same function over here. Let's look at some more things. We've got our flight plan, shows our departure, arrival. Now you can enter that in this point, but I think it's, yeah, you could do that best, I think, on the flight plan portion. Don't do it earlier. These are the legs that are entered. Most of those legs are generated by the departure approach. In this case, there wasn't anything that I could do. It just says none with the departure, which is odd because there are different ways to depart, but that's not what's included in this one. Click departure arrival again. Now you hit arrival for Pittsburgh, and now you get all your options. We'd be choosing an ILS for 28 right, for instance, with a transition called nasty, and we'd want to use the Fuga to standard terminal arrival route with a transition with the VOR CTW. I know all this from looking at it ahead of time. Then we're going to click the flight plan execute there, and now when we go to the legs, you'll see that everything is here, and next will take us to the next page and the next page and the next page. You can't jump by scrolling continuously back to the first page. You must use the previous to go back to square one. These altitudes aren't set properly, so I know, for instance, I'm supposed to be at 10,000 when I go past the air VOR, so I'll put back. There we go. If I can get my tongue tied around it. Backslash. This was going to be 17,000. Oops, I'm going to delete that. Backs 17,000. There we go. And then whiskey, probably more like 6,000. So we'll go like this, and you can see I'm just going to shorten this up because we'd go on forever. I'm just going to pick these figures here. You'll notice that some of them are already pre-selected based on the route, like you're supposed to be at 5,000 at Kurs. So obviously these are going to come in a little low, so I'd want to adjust those as well and just move on from there. So it's a bit of a touchy-feely kind of thing, but you can figure that's how it works. Here's your fuel management pages. There are 3 of them. You can just run through those for informational purposes. Shows you your performance. Your MFD menu, this is nice. You can show airports, VORs, NDBs, and waypoints, or not, for instance. So that I like, it's handy. The MFD advanced, I don't even play with that. This one doesn't do anything. Previous, next, execute, clear, delete, write, dim. That pretty much hits everything you need to know with the FMS. I'm just going to leave it then on legs, and we'll go on from here. We're going to go ahead and turn on our nav lights now. which are here. And then since we're in this view, we're going to go ahead and turn on taxi recognition, strobe, and tail flood. It's not the nighttime. I know a lot of people don't turn that on, but I just turn everything on anyway. Your flaps are here, and just since it's so visible and easily accessible, if there's only two settings. There's the first setting right here, and then there's the second setting, which is full. Takeoff, we'll just have the first setting, and then landing will land with full flaps. So we'll leave it on the first right there. And if you want to see where it's at on this here, this is your flap indication right here as well. We're going to look now for our gen ties to make sure that they are on norm, and that's the middle section here. They are in fact on norm. The pressurization of the cabin is down below us here, to the right of the pilot's arm. You dial up the cabin altitude to, oh, I don't know, just pick something like 6,000. So when it gets to 6, it'll be at 6,000. You can change the rate that the climate changes, the pressurization changes in the cabin. I'm not sure that that actually is effective, but there's that possibility. And since we're down here, we're going to turn on the rudder boost. You can lift this arm if you need to see better. The cabin pressure dump is not something we want to play with right now. That would only be on the other end of this journey. So we'll just go back up now to the pilot and command spot and back out a little bit, and we'll run on from here. Next, we're going to have a look-see over in the co-pilot section. I was just looking for a best view. That's not a bad one there. This is the environment control. Here you've got the cockpit controls for the blower, which will leave an automatic, and the temperatures. This does dial up. Here's the blowers for the back and their temperature settings. You're going to want to have your environmental control knob here on auto, just so that we can get the bleed air going. And then the bleed air left and right is going to be on. So we'll click left and right. Notice our annunciators went off, so that's good. We'll leave the switch here on auto for the environmental bleed air. And the rest over here should be in good shape and enough. And we're ready then to move on even up to the altitude and other settings right here. There is a shift for this. I believe it's shift 3. There we go. And we'll pull that up because I think sometimes the angle is better. Here you've got the flight director for the pilot, flight director for the co-pilot, vertical speed switch, which this is your rotation piece for vertical speeds, what you want. Vertical nav, I've never used it. Flight level change, once I'm up on my speed strip to the speed that I intend to climb at, I can hit FLC and it'll maintain that speed and adjust my rate of climb for me until I reach the altitude that I've set here. The speed, if you left click the center, changes it from Mach to knots to Mach to Knox. That's all it does. You can alter your speed settings here on your speed tape section on the left of the PFD, and I'm just running my mouse wheel with the arrow on the edge there, and it takes a little while. I don't know if there's a speedier way to do this, but we'll run it up to maybe about 127 or something like that. Half bank, nav, heading, approach, alt. If you press alt, it's going to level off at the altitude you pressed. You don't need to do this using vertical speed or FLC to climb to the altitude that's been set, and that is set just like the speed was set. Let's see if I can get this to go. There we go. It's running up now in the larger numbers. If I right click it, or excuse me, left click it, oh, never mind, click in the middle there, it just runs up like 28, flight level 280. I wanted 13, so we're going to run this down to 13. And there is a way, I believe, to get down to the 500s, and why it is that I can't seem to get that right now, I do not know, but we'll see. Let me just chase it for a second here. I figured out the problem. On the pop-up, you can't do it very easily with the right click, but over here on the main one, if you were to right click it, now it's going to run in the hundreds. That's what I was after. So apparently the pop-up is a little limited in that way. I should have just stayed with this in the first place. Again, looking at the options, we've got the yaw damper, we've got the autopilot. This is again the co-pilot's flight director. The VOR2, course 2, VOR1, course 1, speed, Heading, you can get your heading to pop to the nose of the aircraft with a left click. It says push sync. It syncs to the direction of the aircraft. Here it tells you what the heading is listed. It'll change if you roll your mouse left or right. Right? And then if you left click the center, it jumps to the middle again. Also the push cancel for the alt, and then this doesn't do anything. The yaw damper AP disconnect is now disconnected in this piece here. Up, you can get it going, but you'll have to select the AP to turn the autopilot on. So again, we'll press Shift 3 and get rid of that. We're going to drop down now and turn on our auto feather, arm it right there. We'll also turn on our pitot heat right here, left and right. And then if we look at our annunciators, they are all out, so we're in a really good, nearly ready to go condition. By the way, if you're curious as to what the ESIS is, that's just there. It's called the Electronic Standby Instrument System switch. It's there to turn on the alternative gauges. If you've wondered what goes in this empty box, that's exactly what goes there. So if we were to click it to on, it takes about 118 seconds, 120 seconds to run in through all its systems, and it'll turn on. It'll be an alternative gauge. It's got different features, but because it's backup, you really don't need to pay any attention to that. So just a brief review now at this point, since we're getting close to taxi. We've got our flaps set. We've got our props high. We've got our landing lights. They'll turn on when we get near the runway. We'll turn off our taxi lights then as well when we get ready to get onto the runway. We'll have our engine auto ignition switch is off. Our annunciator lights are all off. Our strobe light is on. Our tail flood is on. Our transponder, then we would move to on. If you remember here where the transponder information is, if you right click the soft key, then you can click this soft key next to standby on to move it to on, remember? So that'll be very handy when the time comes. Hit return to go back to the main page. And prior to taxi, we'll go ahead and run our condition levers up to the full. And now you'll watch our RPMs increase. Right. And just for demonstration purposes, pulling back on the left prop doesn't do anything in now, but it will. These will drop down in the RPMs when I pull back on my prop levers. When we're taking off, we'll have our power levers up to 100% N1. We want to watch those limits and not exceed it. V1 is 105, VR rotate is 110 with a 10 to 15 degree pitch up. V2 is 115. Landing gear comes up, flaps come up, at least by about 125 or thereafter rather. Blue line will be telling us that. Best angle of climb is 125. The best rate of climb early is 140 with a torque of about 65 and a prop RPM of 1800. Yaw damper then can be on, and prop sync will go on as well. And the prop sync is this little square gray box. See, that's just clicked it on, that clicks it off. That's going to be your prop sync. And then on the climb out, again, we can hit the autopilot about 400 feet above ground level. Make sure everything is working like it should. Keep your climb powered about N1 90%. The climb rates lower than 10,000 is about 170 knots. It'll drop by 10 knots for every 5,000 feet above that additional, up to 20 or 35,000 feet. Prop RPM 1600. The checklist for cruise includes cruise speed of 220 to 240 knots, although I know faster is quite possible. Torque 85, prop RPM still around 1600. Auto feather can come off, anti-ice as needed, especially if the outside air temperature is less than 5. And then as you descend, before you get below 10,000, you'll be descending at 280 knots, 1500 rate of descent. Make sure you watch the altimeter, pressurization, auto feather should be armed. And then when you're down below the 10, then you're down to 180 knots, torque 15, prop 1600 RPM. Approach, get your landing lights on, prop lever high RPM, condition levers full. Speed established is 150, torque 25. Then when you set the mid-range flaps, your speed will be down to 130, torque 35, landing gear down. Final approach, flaps full, and then the speed is 105 with a torque of 20. And then on landing, make sure your landing gear is down, your autopilot's off, your yaw damper is off, which will be coinciding with the AP going off. Landing speed is about 100 to 110. If you say 105, you're in a great spot. and then after reverse thrust until 50 knots. And that should be very simple and straight up. The rest of it is pretty self-explanatory. I hope that this video has been really helpful for those of you that want to linger a little bit longer and want to see a little bit more about the PFD and the MFD. Feel free to do that now. Otherwise, that should get you up and in the air. Thanks for watching. Now, for those that are sticking on here, this is the PFD and the MFD. I'm just going to put them side by side. Oops, always drag on the bottom, otherwise it'll do just what you saw happened. So we'll drag both of those closer together. You can see there are very different functions. You got your compass rose over here and your compass arc over here, and you've got an arrow in green through there. This is your format soft key here. You can choose between the rose, arc, and the map. I'm going to go ahead and kick that out now. This menu piece here will choose, the outer wheel, will choose which one you want. Like let's say we want rose, and that's usually my preference anyway. I can click then left click on the outermost end of that knob, and now I've got a rose like I had over here on the MFD. So now they're matching up. That's not intentional. You can also change the MFD format in the same way. Oops, I wanted to move it is all. That's so easy to do. Now we're going to move our menu set here to, let's leave it on arc, and we'll left click the outer part of that button. So now we got a little variable, and I don't prefer the arc, but we'll leave it at that on the other one because it's less interesting to me, or I'm going to be paying more attention to what's over here. So just to run through, this is your speed. That's the speed we set. This is your artificial horizon, your flight director, the degrees up, down. Your altitude is here. Right now it's 29902. If we push B, it switches to the actual according to the active sky. This is your ascent, descent, and just what everything else has. This is the nose of the aircraft. This is what the heading has been entered. This is what's currently going to be operating as the FMS on our GPS, and it's because we've set it to this. The CTW waypoint is the first one. It's a VOR 66 nautical miles away. COM 1, squawk, the time, the universal time. Outside air temperature, COM 2. Over here you got ground speed, true airspeed. There's a saturation air temp, and the ISA at plus 16. Excuse me. Terrain radar. Terrain will show all red because it's a very, very flat topography. Radar, weather, or off. Traffic, on or off. And when it's on, down here on this range piece, you can shrink it down. Or is it the outside one? Yeah, it's the outside one. You can narrow down your range quite a bit. Now it's expanding. There's 80, there's 40. I'm pulling the mouse wheel towards myself. 20, 10, 5, and I think it goes down to 2.5, and then it pops way out to 320. So we'll leave it at 10. There it goes. So that's the traffic, and again, you can turn it off if you want to, if it gets to be too crazy, and go from there. So this is our origin here. Next waypoint, next waypoint, next waypoint. Distances involved, and these will be moving and running eventually here. And we've already explained all those. So I think I'm going to go ahead and kick that off of our screen, keep things simple. Same thing here, you got terrain, radar, traffic, identical to the other one. Format we've seen. The presets here, if you were to change your menu piece, or is it this one? Yeah, there you go, VOR2, VOR1, FMS. Let's say we want VOR1, then just go ahead and click the left outer end of that, and it should stay on that. And we'll hit preset again and run through them. There we go. So hitting preset multiple times over now selects between the FMS or the VOR1. And seems to be a little bit backwards. Oh, that's to switch it to. That's what's going to go to. This is the active. So there's my VOR. There's the course. That's currently set. We'll change that to the course directly to it, which would be 085. See that green line on there? That'll be our flight course. There we go. Now we're set. It says 87, but that's close enough. And if we want to go the FMS, there we go. So I think that's more of a working box again, just like some of the other controls in the aircraft. And that's about it. I think that's enough just to get some familiarity going. There's more to it than meets the eye, but they've got some pretty good directional pieces that are available to you. So thanks so much for being patient. Sorry for any mistakes I've made along the way. Feel free to write any notes in the comments section, and I'd love to learn from you, and I hope that this has been a help as well to you, and that we enjoy our flying and have a great time. So have a good day. Thanks so much, and have fun in the skies.